everybody, I'm Maya and I'm coming to you from the Green Plate Special Kitchen. Today we are making one of the all-time favorite recipes amongst the youth who have come and cooked in our kitchen here, and it is beet brownies. You may be thinking to yourself, really, beets in brownies? But let me tell you, beets add a sweetness and sort of an earthy flavor, and they also make the consistency really smooth and rich, and it's just really delicious to bake with beets. Also, beets are really nutritious for your body. They're high in fiber, high in potassium, and other vitamins too. So that's what we're making today. In addition to beets, of course, for brownies, we've got semi-sweet chocolate chips, we've got sugar, butter, a couple eggs, vanilla extract, all-purpose flour, and salt, and that's it. So these beets look a little bit different, and the reason is because I have roasted them in the oven. So the first step of this recipe is to wrap each beet individually after you trim off the ends in foil and roast it in an oven at 425 degrees for, well, about maybe 45 minutes until it's easily pierced with a fork. So my fork is going nicely into that beet, so I know that it's nice and tender and ready to go. So after I've roasted these beets, I didn't actually do a very good job trimming, but I'm gonna use a paring knife. What you wanna do is to take the skin of the beet off to peel it, and you wanna peel it without getting much of the actual beet flesh coming off as well with the peel. So you can use your fingers to do that, like I'm doing. You can use even like the back of a paring knife carefully, or using a paring knife works well as too, to just gently take the peel off and keeping the beet intact so that you can use it for the recipe. Once you've got your beet peeled, you're just gonna cut it into quarters. And if you started off with a bigger beet, like this size, I would recommend quartering it before you roast it so that it doesn't take quite so long to roast. All of our beets are nicely peeled and quartered here, and the recipe calls for 1 cup of pureed beets, or 2 medium beets. And if you want to measure it after you puree it, just to make sure that you've got your full 1 cup, you can go ahead and do that. But for now, we're going to move on to the second step, which is melting 4 ounces of our chocolate chips with our 1 stick of butter. It's really important not to burn the chocolate as you're melting it. If you have a microwave, you can always melt it in the microwave together and stir it every few little bit as it's melting. You can also use a double boiler or just a bowl sitting on a saucepan with a little bit of water. Or you can just kind of go for it and stir it and do it on low heat and make sure it doesn't burn. That's what I'm gonna do. So first off, I'm gonna measure my 4 ounces, or 2/3 of a cup. So you can either weigh it 4 ounces, or you can measure 2/3. All right, there we go. And my stick of butter is just gonna go right in. And again, I'm gonna do this on low heat, and I'm just gonna stay here as it's melting and keep stirring it so that it doesn't burn. Next, we're going to puree our beets and our 1 cup of sugar together. If you don't have a food processor, you could also use an immersion blender or just a regular blender. I'm gonna use a food processor today. So you're gonna pour your roasted beets in there that have been peeled and quartered. We've got some golden beets and then also some red beets here. And then you're gonna measure out your 1 cup of sugar. And then you're gonna puree. After you've got your beets and your sugar nicely blended, you're gonna add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract and 2 eggs, and then you're gonna blend it up again. It's already looking really beautiful. One of the things I love about this recipe is that your brownies have a hint of purple to them. So I've got my 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract and 2 eggs. And then I'm gonna puree that. Once you've got your beets nicely pureed, you are gonna pour it into your melted chocolate and butter. Get all of that beautiful beet mixture in here. Wow, look at that color. I love roasted beets just on their own. Maybe with some other veggies in there too, like winter squash or potatoes. I love beet soup. And I really love beets and chocolate together. Okay, we're gonna add our flour next. Uh-oh, I'm making a mess. Next up, I'm gonna add just a pinch of salt. And I'm gonna add 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour. So if you wanna measure a nice 1/2 cup, you could use a smaller measuring cup or a scoop. We call this the scoop and swish. You're gonna pile it up high. This is gonna give you a true cup, or the just right amount that you want here. Pile it up high. Then you're gonna use a straight edge. You can use this bench scraper, or you can use the side of a knife or a spatula. Give it a little tap. And then swish. That's gonna go right in to my bowl. I'm gonna stir it in. And that's the last ingredient. That wasn't the last ingredient. How could I have forgotten the most important part? An extra 1/2 cup of chocolate chips. You could also use chocolate chunks for a good texture too. This is a 1/4 cup, so I'm gonna do 2 of these and stir this all together. I wanna use an 8x8 pan for this recipe. Could be circular, could be square like this. And make sure to butter your pan or oil it first. I'm just gonna use a spray oil. Make sure to get all the sides too. And then go ahead and put your beet batter, your beet brownie batter into your pan. Got those chocolate chips adding a nice crunch there. And this is gonna bake for 30 to 35 minutes in your oven that is now preheated at 350. So make sure to turn down your oven to 350 after you've roasted your beets to bake your brownies. Okay, it's going in.
So here we are with some of the beets growing in the Green Plate Special Garden. These little babies are going to be a part of the beet brownie recipe. And so if you look at this bed right now, you'll notice that they're pretty far spaced apart, and that's because we actually used to have tons of beets growing here, and then I've just been gradually harvesting them as they get bigger. So each week I'll harvest, the biggest few handfuls of beets, and then I'll let the remaining ones keep growing. And so at this point we have maybe a couple more weeks worth of beets in this bed. But it's a good spot for you to be able to see the full plant because they're not growing too closely together. You can see most of us think, when we think of beets, we think about the beet root. That's an edible part of the plant. The leaves are also edible. The beet is closely related to Swiss chard. You might have noticed that the leaves look sort of similar to chard, and you can eat the beet leaves. But beets were bred for this root here to be the most tasty part. And so the beet is ready to harvest. Once you start to see it poking up over the ground like this, we like to say that the shoulders of the beets and carrots are showing, and that's how you know that they're ready to harvest. But these, also could be left in the ground if you wanted them to get bigger. Within a couple of weeks, I think these would double in size. So yeah, that's how we think about harvesting beets.
It's been about 30 minutes. I'm going to pull out the brownies and see if they're ready. Ooh, very purple. Okay, so you can use a toothpick or a knife, just right in the middle. You want it to come out fairly clean. Looks pretty clean to me. I think that's just right. So make sure to let it cool for a little while before you cut into them. If you're like us here at Green Plate Special, you just won't be able to wait for the brownies to cool before you dig in. We couldn't even wait for this next video clip until we tried out these brownies. And let me tell you, they are so delicious. We've got these beautiful beets that are making the brownies super smooth and moist, and this chocolate, which is just the best. So let me cut you a piece so you can really see. I would recommend really letting it cool in the pan so that your brownies, when you cut them, they hold together really well. But there you go. That's our beet brownie.